Today I am talking about Victober, the 10th year of Victober running, but my very first year joining in as somebody new to BookTube, both creating content and watching BookTube. So I'm really excited to join in with my very first Victober, especially because for my DIY literature degree all year I have been reading Victorian literature and discovering this year that I absolutely love it. So I've really had great fun putting together this probably ridiculously ambitious pile of possibilities to match all of the different prompts, which this year are graded on different levels. I'm going to try and go for the highest level to read all the prompt books, but we'll see if life gets in the way or not. So the first prompt is Kate Howe's prompt. Now Kate's prompt is to read a book that features friendship in some way, and on her pile of examples of books that you could read, she mentioned the book that I'd planned to read as my Dickens read, because Dickens and Thomas Hardy have both been focus authors for me this year. I'd got Great Expectations planned to read in October anyway, and on Kate's list of possibilities she mentioned that this book would fit. Of course not really sure, I've never read it. On the back I've done a quick précis of it. It does mention friendships with Pip, who's a character I've heard of but never read. This will be my first time reading Great Expectations, so I am really looking forward to adding this to my list of Dickens that I've read this year. So Great Expectations is my book for prompt number 1. So prompt number 2 is Katie's prompt, Katie over at Books and Things. Now her prompt is to read some Victorian writing that isn't a novel, so say a play or poetry, anything really, a short story. Now what I'd love to finish reading is this book. So this is Elizabeth Gaskell. It's a pocket classic version of Lois the Witch and Other Stories. You can see from the tabs at the beginning that I did read Lois the Witch, and I went on a grand Elizabeth Gaskell adventure in the village that's mentioned in the story of Lois the Witch. I had the most wonderful time with that. But also after Lois the Witch in this book, you've got the old nurse's story, you've got the squire's story, you've got the crooked branch, and you've got the short story The Grey Woman. For Katie's prompt, I would love to read all of those 4 short stories, to be honest, and to get to the end of this book. So there's short stories on the horizon for me for Katie's prompt, but also I managed to pick up super cheap the complete poems of Emily Bronte. Now Wuthering Heights is one of my all-time favourite novels. Up until the beginning of this year I'd read Wuthering Heights 4 times, just always loved it. One of my goals this year as part of my Victorian study was to read the rest of the Bronte novels. More of that coming up. One of these books will fit for that. But also I know that Emily writes poetry. I'm not a great poetry reader. I'd like that to change. I'm beginning to address that. I would love to add into that goal of reading all the novels of the Brontes to read this book as well, the complete poems. So you can see how it starts to get a little bit ambitious. I've got 2 books here where I could just have, say, a couple of poems. So whether I'll complete all of these short stories and all of these poems, we will have to wait and see. But in the spirit of Shorty September, I did talk in my last video about how much I've loved larger work set against smaller work. So it might be that I read like a couple of poems every night while I'm reading this, or say a short story while I'm reading one of the longer novels. And I just thought that was a nice way I could continue doing what I've been doing this month in Shorty September. So I'm really excited actually to get to some Bronte poetry as well. So prompt 3 is the lovely Marissa's prompt over at Blatantly Bookish. Marissa's challenge is to read a work of Victorian literature where a character experiences a change in class status, social mobility, rags to riches, fallen woman, etc. So out of her amazing list of possibilities, Marissa also mentioned for prompt 3 that this would fit, so I'm ticking that off, but I do have separate books for all of these prompts. So the book that I've gone for, and I hope it fits, because I don't like researching my new to me literature, Victorian classics, very much. So I'm just hoping that this fits, because this is my Thomas Hardy read, which is booked in anyway for October, because I'm taking part in Jen the Librarian's Thomas Hardy read along, reading all the works of Hardy in publication order. For October, it's The Hand of Ethelberta. So I did grab my 2 books that were locked in anyway, my Dickens and my Hardy read, to see if I could make them fit the prompts. Reading the back of this, it seems like Ethelberta has a secret that she is the daughter of a butler and the staff of her elegant townhouse are her own brothers and sisters. So she's obviously had a change in social class. She wants her family near her, but she's keeping them secret and they're pretending to be her staff. So from what I can gather, just from this tiny blurb on the back, this does fit that change of status challenge. So I'm going to lock it in there for now. I hope I'm right. So this is my book for not only the Hardy read along, but for Marissa's prompt number 3. You've just got to love that cover. So challenge number 4 is Ross's challenge over at Scallydangling about the books. Now this is slightly different for prompt number 4. Ross wants us to go empire spotting. See how many times you can spot signs of empire in your Victorian reading. And I thought, how interesting to put another lens to view the writing that we're reading, the novels that we're reading. But then I thought to myself, do I even know what I'm looking for? So recently in a charity shop, I came across this book for my customary 30 pence that I spend on my books in my local charity shops. And this does actually, along with some other great chapters, it has an entire chapter on empire. See it here, this is chapter number 5 in here. It's a brilliant book. It's got lots of colour and black and white plates. You've got things like the Northwest Passage, ruling the waves, the Opium Wars are mentioned in here. We've got kings of the opium trade, the Anglo-Afghan Wars, the Irish potato famine and the Crimean War are mentioned. You've got the Lady with the Lamp and the Charge of the Light Brigade, life in the British Raj and the Indian Rebellion, Empress of India, Great Exhibition and the New Zealand Wars. We've got the attack on Abyssinia and the Anglo-Asante Wars as well, the Zulu War, Louis Napoleon and the Boer Wars, concentration camps and conquering Egypt, the Suez Canal, European empires and festival of the British Empire. So that's a whole load of subheadings that as an English person I feel like I should know more of, and I don't, and it does make me wonder why we're not taught that in history classes here in England. But it's subject matter that I honestly don't know a lot about. So I'm going to start with this book. I know that Ross didn't set us the challenge of reading a book about the empire, but I think if I'm trying to spot it, I need to know a little bit more about it. I also, a few months ago, remembered that I'd found this book. So this is a Penguin non-fiction by Niall Ferguson, called Empire: How Britain Made the Modern World. So this goes into a lot more depth about Britain and the Empire. Again, I'm really interested to read this. I don't know if I'm going to have time to get to this in Victober. There's so many books here, but it is one that I wish I'd have read leading up to this, because I think that would really help. But it's going on the pile. Whether I dip in and out of it, I'm not sure, but those are my possibilities for Ross's challenge to help me complete that challenge. So prompt number 5 is by Elizabeth over at A Literary Princess. Now, Elizabeth's challenge prompt is to read a work by an underrated Victorian woman writer, meaning not the Brontes, not Elizabeth Gaskell, not George Eliot, not Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and not Christina Rossetti either. So I have got some books by an author that fits this mould that I've been dying to get to. So I am talking about the author Alan Rain, who was right at the edge of the Victorian period. So I've got A Welsh Witch, which is the chunkiest of the 3, but this is the one I'm absolutely bursting to read. Plus we're in October. To read a witchy book in October would be fantastic. So this is my preferred choice, depending on how time is going. I do have 2 slightly skinnier books by Alan Rain, both of which I haven't read. So I've got The Story of a Welsh Homestead and Torn Sails, A Tale of a Welsh Village. I also have a desire to go on an Alan Rain adventure, because my caravan near the ocean in Wales is based very close to where Alan Rain lived and is buried and was writing about. So I think an Alan Rain adventure is calling, and that's going to be my aim for prompt number 5. Prompt number 6 is from Hannah over at Hannah's Books. Now, Hannah's prompt was to read a Victorian work that discusses education. Well, I have one remaining Bronte novel left to read. One of my reading goals for this year was to read all of the Bronte's key novels. So for me, at the start of 2025, I'd only previously read Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights. So I've read all of the rest of them apart from Charlotte Bronte's The Professor. So this is the very last novel to read. This is about somebody taking up a tutor's post. That's all I know about it. I think there's scandal involved as well. A professor, a teacher, a tutor, that brings in the element of education. So I'm definitely going to be reading Charlotte Bronte's The Professor during Victober. But this book also brings into play the challenge that is prompt number 10. Prompt number 10 is Catherine's challenge from the channel Taking Tea with Catherine. So Catherine's challenge was to read a Victorian book that has a connection to Jane Austen somehow. So far this year I read Emma as part of Jane Austen July, and I loved Emma. I'm new to Jane Austen too. When I saw that there was a fragment of Emma at the end of this book, I assumed incorrectly that it was a fragment of Jane Austen's Emma. So when I bought this book, I thought they were promoting Jane Austen as well. It was only when I got this book down for Victober that I realised it actually isn't. It's Charlotte Bronte's unfinished publication that she was writing at the time of her death. And I think because I confused it as Jane Austen's Emma, I just think it fits perfectly. So there is a tiny section at the end for the few chapters that Charlotte Bronte had written, an unfinished work. So I think this book covers Hannah's prompt and Catherine's prompt for Victober. So prompt number 7 we're up to now. So the challenge of Jess from Jess and Dickens.and.docks on Instagram. So Jess's challenge is to step back in time and to read a Victorian work set in a different era. I've got some slightly different alternative types of text to read for this. I've managed to find the very short one-act play by Oscar Wilde of, I was calling it Salome, but I heard somebody else call it Salome. I think Elizabeth called it Salome, so I'm not sure how you pronounce this. Pretty certain that Elizabeth is probably right, Salome. And this is set in, it's biblical, it's about the beheading of John the Baptist. So it's set in a historical time, and I'm really quite interested to read a little bit more of Oscar Wilde. So far with Oscar Wilde, I've only read his one novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray, which kind of incensed me a little bit, although I could really appreciate the beauty of the writing. So it'd be nice to try a play of Oscar Wilde's. So that fits the prompt. But also I've got a kind of ignored anthology book, the New Oxford Book of Victorian Verse, which I have not read a lot from, to be honest. So in here there are some Alfred Tennyson poems that would also fit the bill and kind of link, this is a spoiler, into some of my planning for modules that I want to move on to in the next couple of years for my literature study, that around the idea of the land I live in and the magic of the land where I live. So for that there are poems by Alfred Tennyson about King Arthur. Morte d'Arthur is in here. There's also some extracts in here by the Idylls of the King, Merlin and Vivian in here as well. I can also see the Charge of the Light Brigade by Tennyson, which would fit in with what I saw in the book about the Empire. So it might be that I read some Alfred Tennyson poetry as well for this prompt. So prompt number 8, I think we're on prompt number 8, was Milena at Milena Reads. So Milena set us the challenge of spinning a digital colour wheel and to pick a Victorian book with that cover, which I've already done, and I span the colour orange. So I thought, well, at a push, the Oscar Wilde Salome play has got orange on the front. At a push, the dress and the flowers on the front of the Professor also have orange in. But then I saw on my shelf a book that I recently found in a charity shop, and it's very orange. So this is The Sign of Four by Arthur Conan Doyle, a Sherlock Holmes book. I have never read a Sherlock Holmes book ever, even though I went to the Sherlock Holmes Museum earlier in the year. So it would be nice to read at least one Sherlock Holmes before the end of the year. This is bright orange, so it's only small as well. It comes in at under 150 pages. So I think I'm going to put that on the pile as well for my orange book. Right, prompt number 9 is Roy's prompt from Roy Reads Anything. So Roy wants us to read a Victorian work of fantasy. Well, I thought about the Goblin Market poem in this book. So I came running to this book to see if the Goblin Market poem was in here. It is in here. So that is by Christina Rossetti. I am really excited to read that poem. So I've got a poem to read for that. But also, as part of my DIY literature degree this year, an area of study was fairy tales. And I have yet to read any of Andrew Lang's fairy tales. So you can get the fairy tales in colour books, so the brown book, the lilac book, the green book, the yellow book, which I would love eventually to get. I managed to find the collection book too. I think all of his fairy tales are in 2 collections like this. This is book 2, which I managed to get for just a few pounds, and I was really thrilled about it. Now the brown book is the first book. See how the font is written. This isn't the most brilliant version of this book. I mean, look at that. The pages are rammed full. But the brown book takes up like the first 90 plus pages. So just under 100 pages of this ginormous book is the brown book. And I think I'm going to say I'd like to read the brown book out of Andrew Lang's fairy tales, even if it is from this rather cumbersome edition. So that's a poem, some fairy tales. But then just last week I walked into my charity shop and I found a gorgeous edition, again for 30p, of H.G. Wells' The Invisible Man. It's in these wonderful Macmillan editions. I love these editions with their ribbons on. It doesn't look like it's been touched at all. I've never read The Invisible Man. Again, it's only a little short book, so that's also going on the pile for the fantasy prompt. And then finally we have the group read this year of Margaret Oliphant's Hester. Now, I'd actually planned this to be read next year in January because yes, I have been planning out 2026 for reading. So I'm really keen to get to this book anyway. It's one I really wanted to read, so I'm going to read it earlier. This is going to be a definite that I get to in Victober. I've got it down off the shelf ready to go. So you can see there are an awful lot of books and poems and novels and plays there. It does allow me to keep my current reading goals and my read-alongs ticking over. It gives me a chance to really mix up the reading. There's more poetry in there than I've read all year. There's a play as well. I've not read a play all year. It allows me to touch on some of those aspects that I've been studying this year, but with a Victorian slant with my fairy tales. There is the possibility of adventure thrown in the mix as well. In the background there might be a chance to touch on some non-fiction study as well, which I think just enhances everything to do with your reading if you've got the context there. So taking the fairy tales out of the mix and those non-fiction books and the poetry book, there are still 10 books here, so it is quite a challenging push for that. You can see that is a lot of reading, but also in the mix, something that I can't ignore. I've got my own Candy Reading Challenge 2025. The prompt for October is to read a book with an animal on the cover. I'm also doing the Read Good Challenge, which is October, to read a book with an ugly cover. Mixed into that, I've also got my secondhand Booker Prize shortlist that I'm reading. October's book that covers the candies and it covers both of the reading challenges was going to be Susanna Clarke's Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. It's got an animal on the cover. It was one of the shortlisted books. It's also what I think is a very ugly cover. However, it is over 1,000 pages long, alongside all of the other Victober reading. I've seriously got some reading cut out for me here. If I get to all of these plans, it will be a miracle. So I'm just going to do what I can do and I'm going to enjoy it. If the racing takes away from the enjoyment, I will stop and I'll come back at the end of Victober with only a few read, and that will be fine too. So thank you everybody who has organised Victober. I want to show you all of the pieces of paper that I've just taken out of my study folder. You guys did such a fantastic job with all of your introduction videos, giving your challenge and then giving just so many examples. For somebody that is studying Victorian literature, I wonder if you realise just how useful your expertise being shared is, because now for different themes I've got all of these fantastic lists of books and poems and plays that I could go to for further study. So I do want to finish this video by saying a huge thank you to everybody who shares their expertise on this subject. It is just so useful, and I really do value it. I value your time and I value your expertise, so thank you so much. So are you taking part in Victober? Let me know in the comments section. Tell me what books you're most looking forward to. I would love to know. And thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.